Hello, my friends. Tonight, I want to tell you a story. Once upon a time, in a distant kingdom, there lived a young girl named Isabella. She was born into a family that was not wealthy, but she had a father who loved her with all his heart. Her mother had passed away early, leaving in her heart an everlasting void. Out of love for his daughter, the father remarried, hoping Isabella would have the caring hands of a woman to look after her, so that she might live in a complete family. That woman brought with her a daughter of her own, named Mirabel. Her hair gleamed golden, her skin was white as snow, and her lips as red as blood. Yet in Mirabel's eyes there always glimmered something cold, selfish, and greedy. Isabella, pure and innocent, believed that from then on she would have a sister to share her joys and sorrows with. But little did she know that this bond would never be the peaceful one she had once heard of in fairy tales whispered by the fire. Then, one harsh winter descended. Snow covered the rooftops in white. Trees stood bare and shivered in the biting wind. Isabella's father fell gravely ill and soon departed this world, leaving her in the hands of her stepmother. From that moment on, the mask of gentleness slipped from the woman's face, revealing her cruel and venomous nature. Mirabel was draped in red velvet gowns, adorned with jeweled bracelets, her lips painted a brilliant crimson. Whenever she laughed sweetly, the whole room seemed to shine like summer sunlight. But Isabella was forced to wear rough grey cloth, her hands raw and burning from endless scrubbing, her chestnut hair tangled and streaked with soot. Day by day, Isabella had to sweep the house, tend the sheep on the hills, wash filthy garments in the freezing river. At night, she curled up in her dim little room, with only the moonlight slipping through a crack in the window to keep her company. Yet, in her deep blue eyes, there always flickered a gentle light, like a tiny candle flame that refused to die. One night, when the heavens were filled with silver stars, Isabella sat quietly beside the ancient well. She wept, tears shimmering as they fell and dissolved into the black, bottomless water. The moon reflected upon the surface like a pale halo, and then, from the rising mist, an ethereal figure emerged. It was the goddess of light. Her figure was noble, her long hair flowing like a river of moonbeams, her gown shimmering like the glow of 1,000 stars. Her voice resounded, gentle yet distant, as though carried from the realm of dreams. "Little daughter, why do you cry?" Isabella lifted her red, swollen eyes, her voice trembling as she spoke of her sufferings, her loneliness, and of all the dreams that had withered in the shadows. The goddess, full of pity, smiled softly. From her palm flew forth a white dove, radiant with light, that alighted gently on Isabella's shoulder. "Care for it with love. When the time comes, it shall bring you miracles." Isabella embraced the little bird close to her chest. From that day onward, she shared with it the meagre portion of food she had. The dove obediently fluttered around her, cooing softly. Its black eyes sparkled with an uncanny intelligence, as though it could understand all the grief inside her heart. That spring, the entire kingdom buzzed with excitement. The young King Arthur had declared he would hold a grand ball to choose his queen. The magnificent castle blazed with lights. Marble walls were carved with intricate floral designs. From above, crystal chandeliers glittered, scattering beams of light like fallen stars. Music resounded everywhere. The strings of lyres rang clear. The trumpets blared triumphantly. Maidens across the land eagerly prepared their finest dresses, longing to step into the grand hall where the king, handsome, broad-shouldered, his wavy brown hair shining, would choose his future queen. Isabella, too, longed to go, but her stepmother sneered. pouring millet into the fireplace ashes, commanding her to separate them before she could even dream of leaving. She sat crying by the pile of ash, her hands trembling. The white dove suddenly burst upward, wings flapping as if to call for help. And then, through a veil of silver mist, the goddess of light appeared once more. "Do not cry, my child. I will help you." Immediately, hundreds of sparrows swept down from the forest. Chirping and fluttering, they separated millet from ash, one pile here and the other there, finishing in no time at all. Then the goddess raised her hand. In that instant, Isabella's torn grey dress transformed into a gown of sky-blue silk, a silver cloak glimmering like the moon, and a pair of crystal shoes that sparkled like frozen drops of water. The goddess placed a hand upon Isabella's shoulder, her voice both tender and stern. "Go now, but remember, before the clock strikes 12, you must leave that place." Isabella gazed into an old bronze mirror and was stunned. She could hardly recognize herself. From a frail girl clad in rags, she now radiated like a celestial maiden descended from the heavens. She mounted a white horse and rode toward the castle. When Isabella stepped into the grand hall, all sounds came to a halt. Guests ceased their laughter. Their chatter froze on their lips. Every gaze turned toward her. Beneath the shimmering chandeliers, she shone brighter than the flames of 1,000 candles. King Arthur, his wavy brown hair framing his strong features, his eyes shining like blue fire, could not take his eyes from her. He stepped forward, smiled, and offered his hand. "Fair maiden, may I have the honor of this dance?" Isabella bowed her head softly. In the king's arms, she whirled gracefully, the hem of her blue gown sweeping like the wind. The notes of the waltz echoed through the hall, leaving the crowd entranced in wonder. But then, the great clock began to toll. 1, 2, up to 12. Isabella gasped in fear and fled. She dashed across marble corridors, her crystal shoes clattering against the stone. Racing over the stone bridge spanning the dark river, she stumbled, leaving behind a single glass slipper, clear as frozen dew, gleaming faintly in the night. When Isabella fled from the ball, she vanished into the night like a wisp of smoke. Upon the stone bridge across the dark river, she left behind a single crystal shoe, transparent and gleaming faintly, like frozen morning dew, like an unfinished vow. The next morning, the kingdom thundered with the royal decree. "Whosoever fits this shoe, I shall marry." The announcement spread far and wide, from the palace walls to the farthest village in the woods. Countless maidens rushed forth, each hoping their foot would match the enchanted shoe. In the crowded throngs was Mirabelle. Draped in a fiery red gown, her lips painted scarlet, her eyes sharp as blades, she stood proudly before the guards. When the crystal shoe was presented, she shoved her thick foot into it. But the cold, flawless glass resisted falsehood. It could not stretch nor bend for lies. Her eyes flashed with hatred, though she forced a brittle laugh that rang hollow. At last, Isabella approached. She walked humbly, clothed still in coarse grey cloth. Her stepmother curled her lip in scorn, hissing, "The bronze bell would sooner sing than that shard of glass fit her foot." But as Isabella gently slipped her foot into the shoe, it fit perfectly. Light radiated from the crystal, dazzling the chamber. Then, from her kerchief, Isabella revealed the second shoe. She placed it upon her other foot, and the twin pair gleamed brighter than 1,000 candles. The hall erupted with cheers. King Arthur stood speechless, his heart overflowing. He rushed forward, clasped Isabella's hand, and before all declared, This is the bride I have sought." Soon after, the wedding was celebrated in glorious splendor. The castle shimmered with white marble and embroidered tapestries. The rose gardens bloomed year-round. Isabella, draped in a bridal gown of radiant white, walked the crimson carpet, her blue eyes shimmering with tears of joy. King Arthur placed a jeweled crown upon her head, kissed her hand, and the kingdom roared with jubilation. But happiness was fleeting. Though she dwelled in golden halls, Isabella's heart remained tender. She remembered her father's death anniversary and humbly asked to return home to honor him. Her stepmother's eyes burned with hatred. To see Isabella, now queen, while her own daughter remained nothing, stoked her fury. In the shadows, her wrinkled face twisted like a serpent ready to strike. Feigning gentleness, she said, "Daughter, climb the red apple tree behind the house. Pick fruit for your father's altar." Isabella, ever gentle and obedient, climbed the tall tree, its leaves whispering in the wind, its fruit gleaming red like drops of blood. But as she reached for a branch, her stepmother signaled to the servants. The axe fell. The tree crashed down with a deafening roar. Isabella's slender body plunged into the river below, its dark current swirling and merciless. The icy water swallowed her breath, her blue eyes wide with terror, then slowly closed. The heavens dimmed. Black clouds swirled, thunder cracked, winds howled through the trees. Meanwhile, Mirabelle wrapped herself in Isabella's robes, returned to the palace, and posed as queen. Yet in her gestures and gaze, there was no trace of Isabella's kindness. King Arthur noticed at once. This was not the woman he had danced with, whose eyes shone with light and voice rang like song. His sorrow grew heavier with every passing day. But Isabella's soul did not rest. She returned first as a nightingale, a small brown bird whose trembling wings carried her spirit. She fluttered around the palace gardens, singing mournful songs, her voice piercing with sorrow as though recounting the truth of her fate. King Arthur, sitting at the window, wept when he heard her. In those haunting notes, he felt Isabella's presence, her love, her pain. But Mirabelle, enraged, commanded, "Catch that wretched bird and kill it." The nightingale was seized and cast into the fire. Flames devoured its fragile body. Yet from the ashes, 2 tall maple trees sprang forth, their green canopies shading the royal throne. Beneath their branches, King Arthur would sit, his heart eased by their comfort. But again, Mirabelle could not abide their presence. She ordered them cut down. When the axes bit into their trunks, blood-red sap trickled out, staining the blades. The woodcutters swore they heard cries of anguish echoing within the timber, and their hands shook as they obeyed the cruel order. The ashes of the maples scattered into the wind. From the ashes, an apple tree grew, and from the apple tree grew a sparkling golden apple. It rolled into the hands of a poor old baker woman. The woman, though impoverished, was kind of heart. She brought the apple home and kept it safe. That night, when she opened the fruit, a dazzling light burst forth, and from within stepped a girl with chestnut hair and blue eyes, Isabella, reborn. The woman took her in like a daughter. Isabella helped with chores, sweeping, cooking. Most of all, she learned to bake honey cakes sprinkled with cinnamon. The cakes she baked were golden and crisp, their sweet fragrance drifting through the streets, enchanting all who passed. People stopped, drawn in by the aroma of honey and spice. Isabella smiled again, her blue eyes glowing with quiet happiness. No longer a queen in marble halls, she lived humbly yet content, for she had life, love, and kindness once more. But destiny had not finished weaving its dark threads. One day, King Arthur, disguised in plain clothes, wandered through the village streets. His horse slowed before a humble bakery, for the air was filled with the rich aroma of honey and cinnamon. The king dismounted, drawn irresistibly by the fragrance. He stepped inside and purchased a cake, golden and crisp, its sweetness tempting. He took one bite and froze. His eyes widened. His heart thundered. That flavor. It was the very taste of Isabella's hands, the taste he had longed for and mourned. "Who made this cake?" he demanded, his voice trembling. The old baker woman smiled kindly and called into the back, "My foster daughter." And then Isabella stepped out. Under the golden light of the sunset, her chestnut hair gleamed, her cheeks glowed, and her blue eyes sparkled with joy. Arthur staggered as though struck by lightning. The world around him seemed to halt. There was no mistaking her. It was Isabella. He rushed forward, tears streaming, and pulled her into his arms. Isabella trembled, her slender hands clutching his broad shoulders, her own tears mingling with his. For a long moment, there was nothing but the pounding of two hearts reunited. But the darkness had not vanished. When Mirabel learned Isabella had returned, jealousy erupted within her like a wildfire. Her eyes turned blood red, her lips pressed into a thin line. She hissed, her voice filled with venom. "How is it that you are so beautiful? Tell me your secret." Isabella, no longer the naive maiden she once was, looked upon her stepsister with cold blue eyes. Her voice was calm, but carried an eerie resonance, as if echoing from the underworld itself. "Do you wish to know? Then do exactly as I say." She ordered the servants. "Dig a pit, deep and wide. Fill it with boiling water." Smoke and steam rose, the acrid stench filling the air. Mirabel stood by the pit, her eyes glittering with greed and suspicion. Isabella smiled, a chilling, bloodless smile that froze the marrow. "Step inside. This is the path to eternal beauty." Mirabel bit her lip, but her craving for glory was stronger than fear. She descended into the pit. At once, the searing water touched her flesh. A scream tore from her throat, echoing across the palace halls. Her skin blistered, peeling. Blood bubbled to the surface. The smell of burning flesh and iron filled the air. Her hands flailed wildly, but soon her movements slowed, then ceased altogether. The world fell silent. Only the rising white steam lingered, carrying with it the stench of death. Isabella turned her face away, her blue eyes icy. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "That is the price of deceit and greed." Mirabel's body was carried away. Isabella commanded that it be salted and made into a jar of fish sauce, then sent to her stepmother. The old woman, ignorant of the truth, received it eagerly. She opened the jar, the savoury fragrance wafting up. "How delicious!" she exclaimed, and devoured it greedily. But then, her fingers brushed against a golden strand of hair entangled within. She froze. Her body trembled violently, her eyes bulging wide. Her heart nearly stopped as realization dawned. She had eaten the flesh of her own daughter. Her scream shattered the air, a cry so ghastly it chilled the soul. She collapsed to the ground, vomiting, her body convulsing. Terror distorted her face into a grotesque mask. Death came swiftly, dragging her into darkness with that horror forever etched upon her features. From that moment, the shadow of envy was gone. King Arthur and Isabella returned to their throne. But Isabella was no longer the same innocent girl. Her eyes, though still blue and gentle, now held a depth sharpened by sorrow, and her smile, though kind, carried the weight of all she had endured. In the Golden Palace, laughter returned. The rose gardens bloomed crimson once more, the marble gleamed white, and the music of lyres drifted sweetly on the spring breeze. The people of the kingdom rejoiced, their voices lifting Isabella and Arthur's names in praise. Children sang in the meadows, their laughter echoing like bells. Lanterns glowed warmly in every home. Justice and prosperity flourished across the land. And through the ages, the people told Isabella's story as an eternal lesson. Goodness may be crushed, drowned, even slain many times, but its light never dies. It rises again, reborn, stronger than before. Evil, no matter how finely it cloaks itself in splendor, will always consume itself, destroyed by its own malice. Thus King Arthur and Queen Isabella ruled in peace and wisdom, and the story of the crystal shoe lived on, both wondrous and terrifying, sorrowful and radiant. A final message whispered through time. The light of truth and kindness may be buried, but it will always rise again. Darkness, sooner or later, must pay with its own blood.